entire game has been played on the surface of this little world here. Now at this point we're actually dealing with a very little toy planet. Almost again like the Montessori toy idea. You know, what happens if you give somebody a toy planet, you know, and let them play with a lot of dynamics on it? You know, what could they discover? What might they learn on this? This world was actually extracted from the player's imagination, so this is the planet that the player evolved on. So things like the buildings and the vehicles, the architecture, civilizations were all designed by the player up to this point. So here's a little city with some of our guys kind of walking around in it. Well, most games kind of put the player in the role of Luke Skywalker, and you know, this protagonist playing through the story. Really, this is more about putting the player in the role of George Lucas. You know, I want them, after they played this game, to have extracted an entire world that they're now interacting with. Now, as we pull down here, we actually still have a whole set of creatures living on the surface of the planet. So all these different dynamics going on here. In fact, I can look over here, and this is kind of a little simplified food web that's going on with the creatures. I can open this up and then kind of actually scan what exists on the surface, and you get some sense of the diversity of creatures that were brought in. You know, some of these were created by the player, others by other players, automatically sent over here. But there's a very simple little kind of calculation of what's required, how much plants are required for the herbivores to live, how many herbivores for the carnivores to eat, etc. That you're actually having to balance actively. Now, also with this phase, we're getting more and more godlike powers for the player that you can kind of experiment with this planet again as a toy. So I can come in and I can do things and kind of just treat this planet as a lump of clay. We have like very simple little weather systems you see here, very simple geology. For instance, I could open one of my tools here and then like carve out rivers. So this whole thing is kind of like a big lump of clay, a sculpture. I can also play with the dynamics of this world over time. So one of the things I can do is start pumping more CO2 gases into the atmosphere. And so that's what I'm doing here. There's actually a little readout down there of our planetary atmospheric pressure and temperature. So as I start pumping in more atmosphere, we're going to start pushing up the greenhouse gases here. And if you'll start noticing, we start seeing the ocean levels rise over time. And our cities are going to be at risk too, because a lot of these are coastal cities. You can see the ocean levels are rising now. And as they encroach upon the cities, I'll start losing cities here. So basically, I want the players to be able to experiment and explore a huge amount of failure space. So there goes one city. Now over time, this is actually going to heat up the planet. So at first what we're going to see is a global ocean rise here on this little toy planet. But then over time, and I can speed it up just a little bit, we'll actually start to see the heat impact of that as well. So not only will it get hotter, but at some point it's going to get so hot that the oceans will entirely evaporate. So first they'll go up and then they'll evaporate, and that'll be my planet. So basically what we're getting here is kind of maybe the sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, you know, in about 2 minutes. And that actually kind of brings up an interesting point about games. Now here our entire oceans are evaporating off the surface. And as it keeps getting hotter, at some point the entire planet's going to melt down. Here it goes. So we're not only simulating kind of biological dynamics of food webs and all that, but also geologic, you know, at a very simple kind of coarse scale. And what's interesting to me about games in some sense is that I think we can take a lot of long-term dynamics and compress them into very short-term kind of experiences. Because it's so hard for people to think 50 or 100 years out, but when you can give them a toy and they can experience these long-term dynamics in just a few minutes, I think it's an entirely different kind of point of view, where we're actually mapping, using the game to remap our intuition. It's almost like in the same way that a telescope or a microscope recalibrates your eyesight. I think computer simulations can recalibrate your instinct across vast scales of both space and time. So here's our little solar system. As we pull away from our melted planet here, we actually, turns out, have a couple of other planets in this solar system. Let's fly to another one. So in fact, we're going to have just an unlimited number of worlds you can kind of explore here. Now, as we move into the future and we start going out into space and doing stuff, we're drawing a lot from things like science fiction. And kind of all my favorite science fiction movies, I want to basically play out here as different dynamics. So this planet actually has some life on it. Here it is, some indigenous life down here. Now, one of the tools I can eventually earn from my UFO is a monolith that I can drop down. Now, as you can see, these guys are actually starting to kind of go up and bow to it. And over time, once they touch it, they will become intelligent. So I can actually pick a species on a planet and then make them sentient. See, now they've actually gone to tribal dynamics. And now because I'm actually the one here, I can actually, if I want to, get out of the UFO and walk up, and they should be worshiping me at this point as a god. At first they're a little freaked out. Okay, well maybe they're not worshiping me. I think I'll leave before they get hostile. But we basically want a diversity of activities the players can play through this. You know, basically I want to be able to play, you know, Day the Earth Stood Still, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Star Trek, War of the Worlds. Now, as we pull away from this world, We're going to keep pulling away from the star now. One of the things that always kind of frustrated me a little bit about astronomy when I was a kid is how it was always presented so two-dimensionally and so static. As we pull away from the star here, we're actually going now out to interstellar space, and we're getting a sense of the space around our home star. Now, what I really wanted to do is to present this, basically as wonderfully 3D as it actually is. And not only that, but also show the dynamics and a lot of the interesting objects that you might find maybe like in the Hubble at, pretty much realistic frequencies and scales. So most people, kind of have no idea the difference between like an emissive nebula and a planetary nebula. But these are things that we can kind of put in this little galaxy here. So we're flying over here to what looks like a black hole. I want to basically have the entire zoo of Hubble objects that people can kind of interact with and play with, again, as toys. So here's a little black hole that we probably don't want to get too close to. But we also have stars and things as well. If we pull all the way back, we start seeing the entire galaxy here, kind of slowly in motion. And this is another thing where, like, typically when people present galaxies, it's always been these very beautiful photos, but they're always static. And when you actually bring it forward in time and start animating it, it's actually kind of amazing, what a galaxy would look like fast forward. This would be about 1 million years a second because you have about roughly 1 supernova every century or so. And so you would have this wonderful sparkling thing with the disk slowly rotating, and this is roughly what it would look like. And so really part of this is about bringing the beauty of this, of the natural world, to somebody in a very imaginative way so that they can start calibrating their instinct across these vast scales of space and time. Now, one thing that Chris actually mentioned to me the other day was he was kind of wondering what kind of gods that the players would become, because as you think about it, you're going to have 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds, whatever, flying around this universe, and they might be a nurturing god. They, might be bootstrapping life on planets, trying to terraform and kind of spread civilization. You might be a vengeful god going out and conquesting, because you actually can do that. You can go in and attack other intelligent races. You might be a networking god, kind of building alliances, which you can also do in the game. Or just curious, going around wanting to explore as much as you possibly can. But basically, the reason why I make toys like this is because I think if there's one difference I could possibly make in the world that I would choose to make, it's that I would like to somehow give people just a little bit better calibration on long-term thinking, because I think most of the problems that our world is faced right now is the result of short-term thinking and the fact that it's so hard for us to think 50, 100 years, or 1,000 years out. And I think by giving kids toys like this and letting them replay dynamics, very long-term dynamics over the short term, and getting some sense of what we're doing now, what it's going to be like in 100 years, I think probably is the most effective thing I can be doing, probably, to help the world. And so that's why I think, personally, that toys can change the world. Thank you.